You have the latest on the sentencing.
Yeah, so just within the past couple of minutes, she did impose a 2-year prison sentence for Officer Taylor. That is historic here in Travis County, Bryan and Quita, not only because Officer Taylor is the first officer to be convicted, it is believed, for an on-duty shooting, but now facing a 2-year prison sentence on that deadly conduct charge.
Now, what were his attorneys actually asking for in this particular sentencing?
So his attorneys asked for what is called community supervision, a form of probation. And so that is what they saw. But throughout the afternoon, and frankly, in the weeks leading up to this announcement today by this judge, Judge Blasey in this case, there had been growing conversation within the criminal justice community in Travis County about whether or not Christopher Taylor was eligible legally for community supervision. And there was some impassioned arguments this afternoon about whether or not he was eligible for probation. The state saying that they did not believe he was, the defense saying that they did believe he was, the judge agreeing with the state, and again, imposing that very rare 2-year sentence in the shooting death of Mauris DeSilva.
Let's talk about how rare that is. And we talked about his case previous to this separate from the Michael Ramos case, in which he was not convicted. This is a different situation, though, and now he will face a 2-year prison sentence. What could that have been, Tony?
Well, I think one of the most fascinating and interesting things about this case is that if you step way back, going back to when it first happened in 2019, then Police Chief Brian Manley said on the stand just days ago, as he was testifying on behalf of the defense, that it was the contention of the Austin Police Department brass at that time that Officer Taylor had not violated policy. So then when you look at how far this case has traveled from that belief by that administration at that time to now this 2-year prison sentence, that is quite a distance. And Prosecutor Dexter Guilford actually spoke to that in his closing remarks, saying that in his mind and in the minds of the state, that simply revealed that it was time for a culture change and time for a mindset change within the Austin Police Department.
So what happens with Taylor now? Is he just booked? Is he taken straight to prison? What's going to happen?
Well, we're going to have to see what happens because as we were coming on the air and as I was joining you, Taylor's defense team was announcing to the judge that they plan to file an appeal and were imminently filing an appeal. So because of that, Taylor could potentially be entitled to a bond while his case goes to a higher court for a higher court to decide whether or not the jury got it right. Well, not so much whether the jury got it right, but whether or not there were errors during the course of the trial. That is a process that could take years or longer. And so if the judge grants this appeal bond, Officer Taylor would not go to prison immediately. He could wait for that process to play out, a potentially lengthy process.
Judge Blasey has sentenced him to 2 years in prison. Let's talk about today, what happened today. Margaret Moore took the stand today, which became a bit controversial, not really controversial, but there was some discussion there because of her role and the people she's worked with in the past as the district attorney.
And keep in mind, she was the district attorney when this shooting occurred. So it was her administration at that time that initially evaluated Officer Taylor's actions in the death of Mauris DeSilva. They did not take it to a grand jury. They did not get an indictment. And that was part of what the reason the defense wanted to have her on the stand today was. But yes, ultimately, she did not offer material testimony, a legal term, material testimony, because there was a discussion about whether or not the judge who worked as part of Margaret Moore's administration could ethically consider her testimony as part of the proceeding today.
Now, there's another police officer, APD officer, that is supposed to be going on trial for the shooting death of Mauris DeSilva as well. Will the Christopher Taylor sentencing and verdict have any sort of ramifications on his particular trial?
That is one of the big questions that so many people are asking, is if you are Officer Carl Crecia, who is also charged with murder. Keep in mind, Christopher Taylor was initially charged with murder. He went to trial on that deadly conduct charge. Prosecutors did not proceed on the murder charge. But one potential possibility is that Officer Carl Crecia could go to trial, a jury view his actions, although they are very similar, a jury view his actions in a completely different fashion and acquit him. I think it's also possible, and there are rumblings within the criminal justice community about this as well, about whether or not Carl Crecia's defense approaches the state or the state approaches Carl Crecia's defense to try to work out some sort of plea agreement in his case, knowing now what happened to his fellow officer who has now been convicted of a third-degree felony, who has now been sentenced to 2 years in state prison.
Finally, Tony, let's talk about the significance of this in a broad perspective for Travis County and the city of Austin. This is a unique situation. The charges were brought, and obviously the conviction was handed down. Now the sentencing part of this has taken place. How rare is it that an officer in Austin and Travis County is facing punishment in this manner?
It's exceedingly rare, not just in Austin, but really across the state and across the nation. Yes, in the aftermath of George Floyd's death in Minneapolis in 2020, we saw the prosecution, in some instances, the successful prosecution of police officers across the nation. But at the same time, experts who track this stuff, who track prosecutions of police officers, will still tell you that the numbers show very few police officers are ever indicted or charged with crimes. Of those, even fewer are convicted. Of those, even fewer ever go to prison. And so that is why this case is getting so much attention. One other thing about this case that I just want to highlight as well is that among multiple police officer shootings that we have covered for decades, this case also stands out because it did not necessarily grab the attention or scrutiny of the local activist community, frankly, of the media, and then now to see again that it got modest attention at the time and how far this case has now traveled with a police officer being convicted and sentenced to prison is very striking.
And we're still waiting to hear reaction from our local police officials and state officials as well.
Absolutely, yes. And they're going to, no doubt, have plenty to say.
We'll have, of course, much more from the courthouse. We've got reporters and photographers there gathering all that information. Tony, of course, will be gathering more information as well. So we're going to keep you posted on that as we learn it, both on air and online at KVUE.com. Senior reporter Tony Pilhesky with the very latest. Again, let's just recap for those just joining us. Officer Christopher Taylor convicted of deadly conduct and now has been sentenced in that case.
2 years to state prison. We are awaiting to see whether or not the judge allows him to be released during the pendency of his appeal to a higher court. That is a process that could take several years, or whether or not he will be remanded, a legal word for taken into custody, and go directly behind bars this evening.
All right, senior reporter Tony Pilhesky, thank you so much.
Thanks, Tony.
You bet.
And we will be right back.